The Jazz are expected to make some pretty big moves this offseason, particularly in the direction of getting better and creating a championship contending roster. One of those pieces that might be on the way out is probably going to be John Collins, as they have been reported to be willing to enter him into trade talks this offseason. Hello there, my name is Wraith Hoops. Go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe, and in exchange, I will go ahead and break this story down in the crispest way possible without taking up too much of your time. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. John Collins averaged 15.1 points, 8.5 rebounds, and shot a whopping 37.1% from beyond the arc, which was very impressive in and of itself. And on paper, the numbers looked really nice. He's also only 26 years old. He still has 2 years left on his contract, and his contract is a little bit less desirable than most, but it's going to be roughly $26.5 million annually over that period of time, and it also includes a player option. Now, the most likely destination, if it can be pulled off, seems to be to send him over to the Golden State Warriors. And it's a little bit interesting because John Collins was one of those guys where coming into the season, they picked him up for a bag of chips and a bit of pocket lint, effectively, because Rudy Gay wasn't going to be in the rotation for the Jazz to begin with. But they felt as though he was going to be that guy that could be the shooting big that could kind of return to form and probably be like a 20-10 guy. He didn't end up being that, but he also, more importantly, was really struggling on defense. So much so that around the trade deadline, they made it public knowledge out the gate that they were going to go ahead and try and trade the man, but he ended up upping his play and they ended up keeping him around, and there wasn't also a big market for him considering the fact that his contract is just so massive. But if you are the Golden State Warriors, it kind of makes sense to pick him up because he is the more ideal center to have if you're Steve Kerr. Naturally, it's mutually understood that John Collins alone is a hefty pull for them, but on the same side, the projected trade seems to have Andrew Wiggins and Moses Moody getting switched over in exchange for him, which would be nice for the Utah Jazz because they get a player that has been a pretty good wing defender, has somewhat of an offensive game, though Wiggins hasn't really been great. He definitely regressed since the championship year for the Warriors most recently, and Moses Moody's a pretty nice younger piece to have on the roster temporarily at the very least, but it does make sense. There's a little bit of extra wing depth. He shoots about 36% from three, so that's also pretty acceptable, but more so from a perimeter defensive standpoint. Andrew Wiggins is kind of going to be a really important piece, especially as a mentor to the likes of Taylor Hendricks, who is a 3-and-D type of wing player who also has the potential to be a pretty solid lob threat, though it's not the biggest part of his game. He does have a pretty strong back-to-basket game, which kind of differentiates himself from Andrew Wiggins. But at the same time, I think Wiggins, despite falling off a cliff, and it honestly needs to be studied how the heck it happened, he should be a pretty solid mentor, and he's young enough to still be a pretty key piece, because remember, he's still in his late 20s. The man hasn't even touched 30 yet, and we're talking about how he fell off at times. But John Collins fits for the Warriors more so than anything, because if you're a Jazz fan, you want to be able to send out pieces that other teams will, for one, want, and for two, want to give you something of equal value in return. If they don't really want to take on a contract or take on a certain player's skill set, but they're kind of doing you a little bit of a favor, you kind of have to sweeten up the pot with whether it be draft picks or other pieces that they actually care for. But since it seems that they are very interested on the Warriors standpoint, things could end up being potentially the best that we've seen so far. Now, when you think of John Collins, you think about him being the potential small ball center that they've been needing. He's listed at 6'9", 6'10", which isn't terribly tall, but it's still workable. Remember, Steve Kerr and the Warriors were known for their small ball lineups. They were the first to really get around into it and really drive that nail into the ground. With that said, though, he has the ability to be that small ball five. He can rebound, he can shoot, he can play defense under the rim. He's not a terrific rim protector, but he does offer a pretty solid amount of resistance, particularly as we saw later on in the season compared to at the beginning for the Jazz at the very least. He also has a very strong lob threat presence, which could be very helpful, especially as Curry gets even later into his years, assuming that they do still keep Clay, they still keep Draymond, and they don't have many other big pieces that are on their roster to really make something shake. This could potentially extend their championship window and still keep them in that contender status realm of the basketball world, particularly in that Western Conference where things are getting really spicy really quickly. And we just saw the Timberwolves and the Dallas Mavericks duke it out in the Western Conference Finals for Dallas to go ahead and extend their reign to push one stage forward into the finals, where, in my opinion, they'll probably end up beating the Celtics. There are other big trades that could potentially be made by the Jazz, and I will break those down each in subsequent separate videos to go ahead and give them their own individual shine as necessary. But in this particular situation, it does make sense that they end up trading away the kind of bigger name player in John Collins, because Andrew Wiggins just quite honestly hasn't garnered the same level of respect and just overall understanding, and just isn't as appreciated as he once was with the Warriors earlier on, when he really had that run in the playoffs where he looked like a bona fide star really coming into his own. He regressed the next season and we just haven't seen him be the same person since. But with that said, he still shoots in the mid 40s from the field and mid 30s from 3-point range, so he's not a bad or inefficient scorer, and he only averaged 13 to 14 points on a nightly basis. So he's going to have the ability to put the ball on the deck, get those mid-rangers, attack the basket. He has a little bit of a jumper on him, and he will be more reliable in that standpoint than Taylor Hendricks will be temporarily. I think Taylor Hendricks definitely has the ability to do so, but he's not quite there yet, as we understood with him starting out with the G League team, the Salt Lake City Stars, and eventually coming over after the trade deadline because they needed that depth. And also when Lowry was out at certain points in time where he got the opportunity to start and just show that he could be a double-double machine that also can be a strong primary defender as well as a help side defender. And he's capable of not only just stealing the ball, but more importantly, blocking the ball and being a strong deterrent at the rim. Potentially, we could see a world where Walker Kessler ends up being on the court alongside him, which is something that we couldn't do with John Collins, which was the most concerning part and why we're ultimately leaning towards trading John Collins away, because we had a world where you would likely have Lowry at the 3, elite shooting from that standpoint. You were supposed to have John Collins at the 4, which will also be elite shooting, but also a little bit more of a lob threat, a little bit more of the ability to put the ball on the deck. And then you would have Walker Kessler, who will be the strongest return at the rim. But defensively, John Collins couldn't get ready. He wasn't prepared to the greatest degree, and his shooting wasn't exactly the perfect way that it originally needed to be. There was a certain segment in the season where he was shooting darn near 40% from 3 and it looked great, but then he immediately went into a slump afterwards and just shot absolute hot dog water going through the end of the season, which made things really difficult for those of us that wanted to see him succeed with the Utah Jazz, especially when there was very little to be happy about, except for seeing the little plays that the rookies were able to make every now and again during that last stint of the season. But you guys let me know what you think in the comments below. As always, I'm interested to know. Do you think John Collins should end up staying with the Utah Jazz, or would you be comfortable trading him away? Do you think the Warriors are the ideal team to send him to from a mutual benefit standpoint? And do you think Andrew Wiggins and Moses Moody is enough? And do you think they fulfill the needs as I described them to be? Go ahead and drop those thoughts in the comments below. Smash the like button, subscribe if you feel like I did a pretty solid breakdown right there, and let me know if there was anything that I missed. With that being said, it's your boy Wraith Hoops. As always, good morning, good evening, and good night, no matter where you're on the globe watching. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.